Here at the start of the sheep range, attempting a 55-mile or so traverse of the whole thing. Here's the southern end, and a start up at Limestone Canyon over there. Get to the high ridge. I think it averages around 7,000 feet at first. Climb up to some really higher ridges here in middle March, around 9 or 10,000 feet. Hopefully there will be snow to drink up there. And gradually taper off in elevation towards the north. Two of us here, super psyched for this trip. It's been on either one of our minds for quite some time. Years and years. Been here before on the sheeps, but never have attempted this level of trek through. A helicopter hauling a strange linear object. What the heck is that?
They're like probably wondering who the fuck are these crazy people are doing out here.
Helicopter now driving by, two balls suspended beneath. Appears to be transporting two satellite dishes through the gap. Earlier was a tower. Who knows what's later on in the day to come or what passed through yesterday. Despite the Joshua tree death we've seen prevalent a little bit lower down here near Tule Springs before, higher up here, closer to 5,000 feet, got some deeper Mojave elements up here, like Puntia ramosissima there, Puntia basilaris. Kind of strange to see them high up, but Joshua trees up here are doing a bit better. Some of them are even budding for the first time in 2 years or so. I haven't seen any Joshua trees flowering since moving out here, basically. And many of them are starting in this region, but far from all, as we can see here. Also seen Yucca shadidra starting to flower near the Newberries. So the yuccas seem to be starting up for a good season this spring and summer. Maybe it's a function of that summer rain from last year. Maybe they do well after summer rains as opposed to during wet springs or dry springs. Maybe the spring doesn't matter all that much. Trying one of the first canyons of the sheep range at the moment. Southernmost canyons, that is. Still pretty wintry for the most part up here in terms of vegetation, but plenty of things starting to come back. Otherwise evergreen. Trying for the very beginning of the sheep range ridge up ahead here. Hoping to just send it along from there northwards. So Yucca shadidra is up there, doing quite well above 5,000 feet. Not a surprise. South facing at this elevation. More of a Persia aspect on the Ephedra, etc. aspect here on the north side. Definitely taking a rugged path for now, wrapped around the ridge along this high barren slope system. Pretty steep, not quite sure how well it's going to work out. We're about to get towards the head of another canyon though, so remains a little bit critical here. If we can pass forwards or not. Seem to be getting by. these high loose slopes. The skin of our teeth. Making progress deeper into the sheeps, further northwards. A few bumps along the ridge so far. Quite limestoney and shelfy at times, even cliffy at times. Other times more bare and open, rocky to gravelly, like here. This is our first major climb ahead. Once we top out up there, it'll be a bit more level and open for a while, which bodes well for the initial success of this trip, at least. Today's a critical day. Very, very heavy packs for upwards of a week out here. Straight into a steep ascent upwards. Getting towards the top of the worst initial part of this first ascent. Having some health issues lately too, so contending with that. Hoping walking will do me a lot better. Getting decently up there, above 6,500 now. About a 2,000 foot gain so far. Fairly short distance there to Yucca Gap. Way ahead looks promising in general. Past here, more rolling and more quickly walkable. Kind of been a slog all morning so far. Getting into early afternoon now. Beautiful temps, beautiful skies. Gonna top out around 7,000 ahead. Remains Montane Mojave shrubland, especially since we're in these south-facing deserty slopes still. Lots of ephedra, lots of persia. Various other less common and smaller things, a lot of which looks quite dead. This time of year still, unfortunately. We'll see more botany on the northern end after a nice warm week, and with persistently lower elevations towards the north. All the higher stuff is here, first in the south. And I think we're going to be pretty soon arriving into forest zone, pinyon juniper. Looks like an old airplane wing over there. Still some ratty looking Joshua trees this high up. Not subject to too deep freezes at these elevations. There's one poking out of the limestone. The first twisted living juniper of the day. Probably 6,700 feet here. Agave utahensis in the shelter of it there. Those are fairly sparsely distributed all along these slopes as well. There's a glossopedilon. Even Menadora this high. Looking okay, green. That long forested zone ahead looks exceptionally decent. It's got to top out here first, and then we'll have a little bit of a reprieve. A little rough coming down first major peak there, unnamed. But much smoother going ahead, it looks like. Feeling in higher spirits now. All that beautiful juniper forest ahead. Pinyon too, no doubt. Day's getting old. We've been meandering over a series of somewhat nondescript bumps lately. There's a peak we came over some hours ago. There's the Las Vegas range. Looks quite beautiful and gentle and worthy. And basically gradually ascending. Despite all the undulations, they are gradually bringing us higher upwards overall. Pinyon juniper woodland now here, of course interspersed with the montane Mojave shrubbery. Here's the last major climb of the day. Looks rocky from this side, but to the right there the slopes look fairly gentle and open. Nice ridge for a sunset. A nice alpenglow beginning. Patches of snow starting to appear, coming to the rescue in a sense, because carrying full water up here wouldn't have been very possible with a week or so of provisions. So we can keep the water load light, unlike usual, and go a longer distance. It's a fine, mild, still morning on the crest of the Sheeps, making our gradual ascent via various undulations towards Sheep Peak at the moment, our first named high point on the ridge. It's around 9,300 feet, I believe. Spent the night in the upper 7,000s just fine. You can get away with a lot in March. Low elevations to high elevations. Significant snow drifts on these north faces, around 8,000 feet. Much softer than what we saw in the Virgins in January. This time of year now in March, mid-March. Near the equinox time, soon enough. From one perspective, it's quite barren up here. From another, there's ponderosas appearing on these north faces here. Remarkable habitat. Some bristlecones starting to mix in with all the pinyon and juniper predominance. Some ponderosa here too. 3, perhaps 4 pine species all growing together here. Nice area of ecological overlap. Could be limbers, just haven't spotted them per se yet. Couple young bristlers right here. It's crossed over Sheep Peak right there. High ridges between here and their head. It's Hayford Peak, the high point straight ahead. Been up there before, but might go up again. Beautiful bristlecone forest here. These north-facing slopes that hold on to a bit more snow. Beautiful old growth bristlecone forest here. That one's got to be at least 3,000 years old, wouldn't you think? How about that one? Only the oldies attain such statures. The thousands of yearsers. Look at these barrens. Some salvias eking out a living here. Some artemisias as well. Be interesting to see what's occurring here in terms of herbaceous growth a month or two from now. Problem with being up here in a more temperate time of year for up here. I'm not saying it's not mild right now, it is quite mild. There's snow around, so it's not quite temperate or warm yet. And when it does start getting more temperate up here, it's hot below. That's why we're on traverse in March here. Not seeing much for the season's botany yet. They're up at 9,000-10,000 feet almost in middle March. It's still rather wintry up here, or just early spring. Very, very early spring. Expect that to change on the north end. Get back down towards 5, 6, 7,000 feet. Expect to be seeing more stuff popping up north there. A couple few days from now. We've got these erratic forms of ponderosa growing much more like a bristlecone or a limber, as we can see there. They're side by side, but it's definitely a ponderosa to those long needles. Fascicles of fewer than 5. The ponderosas are also growing like the bristlecones up here because it's so cool and windy so much of the time. So they're not gaining their more canyon or foothill forms of being pretty tall and erect, and not really branching outwards like they're doing up here. It's the only one I've seen in a while though, so bristlecones outcompete them in general on a ridgeline like this. Cones developing on the pinions this time of year. Not open yet, but we'll be producing pollen sooner than later. Very stately ponderosas on this slope. Really quite magical. Just spending so much time in the desert lately. Seeing the stately pondos, something else. Very unusual juniper here. Looks like scopularum. Habitat's not quite right. Maybe it's just stunted though. The branchlets are rather flimsy. I can see the oil gland. Sterile though, no cones. Interesting to see Juniper scopularum has a ridgeline shrub up here. It has access to this nice snowy moisture for several months per year. as do the bristlecones and ponderosas, artemisias, and firs even. So some of the more music forest for this elevation in Nevada. Traverse is going relatively well. Pack weights are still a bit punishing, so progress is slow. However, it's not that slow because it's steady along relatively long, gentle stretches, such as this. Any steeper climbs or very rocky areas are a bit punishing with the pack weights. But that'll be alleviating over the next day or two a bit more. Not sure what the terrain up north really looks like. I knew these higher areas were relatively gentle. We'll see what lies ahead. Ridge winds back and forth in these parts. Couple dips before the final ascent up Hayden. Not be able to get there in time tonight, so morning ascent. Hayden is off the main ridge line, and I've been up there before. I might just stick to the ridge line while my partner goes up Hayden. Make that choice in the morning. Based on how I feel from all this roughing it. These pack weights got us feeling like hammered feces. Back towards Sheep Peak that way. It's been a bit of a rough trudge to Hayden here. This is final ascent to the high point of the ridge. Sarcocarp thickets are a bit formidable. The highest ridge of the Sheeps. Plenty of bristlecones around. Let's keep things more open. South-facing higher slopes. Not that unexpected to have sarcocarps here. Skies are slightly unsettled. A bit windier today. Almost cleared the sarcocarps though.